Welcome back to the Hardware Unboxed podcast for episode 50. We're here in person for this one.
I can touch Tim.
How good's that? So we're going to be talking about Arrow Lake in this podcast because obviously we didn't do a podcast last week. And since then, all the Arrow Lake news, well, not news, you've tested the CPUs. All the reviews of at least the three main KSKU parts are now out. So got a fair few thoughts on Arrow Lake in general, a few more in-depth discussions and things to go through, which the podcast is all about, and it's great that we're here in person to do it. So, yeah, I guess, first of all, how's Arrow Lake testing been? You've obviously had a few interesting results and issues and things like that with testing.
It was a somewhat frustrating review process, but then compared to Zen 5, less frustrating, which is weird because less things went wrong with Zen 5. I mean, we've talked about Zen 5 multiple times on the podcast, but it was weird with the Zen 5 CPU. I installed it, fresh install of Windows, installed all the games, drivers, applications, whatever, ran my tests, and the results were really underwhelming and didn't seem right based on the claims that AMD had made. So I informed AMD of this, didn't get any initial feedback, so I thought, well, this is no good. I'll have to install Windows again and try some different stuff. So another install of Windows, load up the games, which took many, many hours of work there. It's not exactly labor-intensive work, but it's eating up precious time. Same results. Okay, maybe it's the motherboard. Try an ASRock motherboard, do the same process again, basically identical results. So at that point, I'm pretty confused as to what's going on. I won't go over the whole process again because you guys probably know it if you listen to the podcast regularly, but that was the ongoing process essentially to try and work out why the hell is this thing just so underwhelming. Whereas with Intel, we already knew going into it, okay, so we're on the lookout here for improved power efficiency. Gaming performance is probably going to be underwhelming. I can't imagine it's going to be better than what Intel has suggested. And then the application results, the productivity results were a mixed bag. So that was sort of the results side of things. But when I first got the CPU, there was the process was messy. So I think I spoke to you about this, didn't I? I'd spent 2 weeks updating all of my results for 24H2.
Yep.
So that in itself is a fun process. And I'm like, all right, I got lucky here. 24H2 was released ahead of time. That's great. I've been able to update all of my results. That's also great, though we did have a bit of a hiccup with 12th gen, not working very well in 24H2, which forced me back to 23H2. And that decision was kind of made when we realized that Arrow Lake was having all sorts of problems on 24H2. So I did my full testing on 24H2 with Arrow Lake. The results were very bad. Then I went back to 23H2, did the testing again. Results still weren't amazing, but they were definitely better. So at that point, we decided to do the split, versions of Windows across the CPUs. So that was like, I don't know, a day of stuffing around there. Then there was the odd stability problem, things like the easy anti-cheat stuff causing blue screens. And there was the Asus motherboard changing the way that the EPS,
the power delivery,
So then I had to, fortunately we caught that. So with the help of Gamers Nexus, I was able to go back and retest all of that and validate all of the data on an MSI board, which I was doing anyway, just hadn't validated the power usage because that's one of the things that, you think probably doesn't need validating on multiple boards. It's more the FPS numbers that we're really interested in. So far from a smooth review process in that sense. And then, just the results being really underwhelming and not terribly exciting.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I feel like Arrow Lake, if it was what Intel had presented, as in the performance was parity for gaming, a bit faster for some of the productivity apps, and they were showing a fair bit more power efficient, not from the heavy multi-core stuff, but for gaming, they were claiming, I think even like half the power or 40% less power, which isn't really what you had shown, at least in...
Probably depends on the games. I looked at the more heavy games.
Yeah, so it could be in lighter games more the case. But I feel like that package that Intel showed wasn't a complete write-off. It obviously wasn't going to be a great generation, like very, very successful. But it was going to be potentially, depending on how pricing ended up and where the performance was, not the worst sort of generation, because if it was like a 14900K level of performance at the minimum, like that was the baseline that you were getting from the part.
Yeah.
But it was more efficient, it was a bit better for productivity, and it was, you could make the case that some people should potentially buy that depending on the part. But when gaming performance came in being not really parity, like it's
5% less on average, but very mixed. I think that was the mixed
Yeah, I think
results
the-
of the problem.
Yeah, you don't really want to have a CPU where the average performance is like 5% lower. The best case, you're getting about the same. Like, I don't think you showed any results where Arrow Lake was faster than the 14900K.
I think Starfield it may have been.
That's right. Oh,
But-
yeah, Starfield by a few percent.
You
Yeah.
could call that parity, that result.
But then, yeah, you were getting like these Cyberpunk results, a Plague Tale Requiem, where the performance was quite a bit worse. Yeah, that's not really what you wanted to see. Whereas if performance was genuinely parity with the 14900K, like it was very tight, like most of the time you were pretty much getting a 14900K. The 14900K is still quite a powerful processor for gaming. And if they could avoid the stability issues, make it more power efficient, make it faster for single thread productivity and multi-thread, it's not the worst. But the fact that in some games it's slower than Alder Lake,
I think
it's difficult to justify, I think.
Well, absolutely. I think I agree to a degree with what you're saying, but I think even if it was this, let's call it best case scenario that Intel presented to media, even if it was that without any of this sort of mixed results and whatever, I still think the reviews would have been overall more positive, let's say.
Yeah.
But that doesn't really matter when the conclusion would have been the same, in my opinion. It still would have been, don't buy this, it's not worth buying because it's just too expensive.
Yeah.
For what you're getting, it's too expensive. And especially with, we've got these X3D CPUs coming up. We'll talk about them on the next podcast, no doubt. But they're going to move the needle forward by some degree.
Mm-hmm.
So it's already like with the 9950 X, it's already pretty tight, and like the best case scenarios for Intel as it stands are tight with that part.
Yeah.
And that part's got some discounts and will no doubt continue to be discounted, whereas I can't imagine the 285K, well, it's a paper launch at this point in time. But then you've got the X3D models coming.
Yeah, it makes it a difficult sell. I guess where I'm coming from is the current Arrow Lake part, as it stands right now, there's only like a very niche use case for it, which I think is why sales have reportedly been quite underwhelming and potentially why Intel hasn't made too many of them. Like, it sounds like they haven't actually produced many of these CPUs. Maybe they knew what was coming and so didn't decide to manufacture a bunch of them. But like the niche use case for this part is there are some workloads where Arrow Lake is the fastest part.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're in that specific use case where Arrow Lake is going to be maybe a couple of percent better than like a 9950X or potentially better single thread in some circumstances, then you would buy Arrow Lake. And if the rest of the package was more what they had showed, then, if you're, say, a mixed use case, you're doing some gaming and productivity, then potentially, depending on your workload, you would have been getting a 14900K plus a little bit more, plus the power efficiency. So if you're already considering buying the 14900K, if that's what you already... there were people that bought a 14900K in the previous generation and the 13900K the generation prior, and Zen 5 didn't shift the needle that much. You're sort of looking at that and it's like, yeah, I guess for the people that would have considered a 14900K, now you would just buy the 285K and it's a little bit better and more power efficient.
Yep.
Whereas what the product actually is if you were considering the 14900K, you probably wouldn't consider the 285K unless you're in that very niche productivity use case. For most other workloads, mixed things, you would either go with just the 9950X or 7950X as is, because that part is better than it at gaming and generally similar in productivity performance. You'd wait for like an X3D part, which gives you that better mix. Or you just go with the 7800 X3D, which is already on the market, and obviously the 9800 X3D is coming. And so they've kind of again, it really needed to be at minimum the level of the part that they already had.
Mm.
And it's like, I saw some comments on Twitter and things saying, "Oh, reviewers are flip-flopping between one time complaining about the performance gains not being enough,
Oh, yes.
and then, now we're flipping to saying, well, there's efficiency gains, but no one cares about efficiency gains. It's all about performance." And
That's
sort of,
such a bad take.
yeah, flipping between these two opinions of like, we're never satisfied. We're not satisfied with efficiency gains. We're not satisfied with performance gains. We need both, which is not true because,
Well, if it needs both to compete, it's true.
yes.
Like, I don't make the rules up. Like, if you need both of those things to be a competitive product that you'd recommend, then sure.
Yeah, but I think it's related to the price, right? Like
Yeah.
a product that's more efficient could be a good buy if it's also the right price.
Yeah, there's multiple things that it needs to achieve in order to be a viable option.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, that comment seeing a few of those comments was a little unusual because it's never a case of like, we're expecting. I think we even talked about in the podcast before these parts came out. Like we're not expecting Intel to take their product, which was similar-ish in performance, generally not quite as good, especially for gaming, and worse power efficiency, and just fix both of those things in one generation. We're always expecting them to have to tackle one or the other.
Yeah, but dumbing it down to just power efficiency is very silly because there are multiple issues that needed to be addressed, and not all of them have been. Multiple reviewers had stability concerns, and we're not saying that there's silicon degradation occurring and it's going to be.
No, this is at launch stability, which is a different issue.
Teething issue stability, which you expect to get or expect to be addressed, but you should still notify people who are looking at buying this part that there are stability concerns, there are compatibility issues that are causing blue screens of death, all that sort of stuff. So that's an issue. The price isn't super competitive. Need new motherboard, all that sort of stuff. A lot of the CU DIMM memories hideously expensive. So there's so many different factors at play here, and then the mixed performance as well. So it's not like we're getting greatly improved power efficiency with, as we've been talking about, even if it's parity performance that's it's here, guys. It's here. Here's the performance. The performance is here. Then it's a lot of the times it's here. A lot of the times it's kind of in the middle here. Then you're back down here, and then look, we got a good result. No, back down. Like it's all over the place, and it's the mixed bag in terms of especially gaming performance was more bad than it was to good.
Yeah,
like it wasn't great. So you can't. I can improve the performance of the 14900K. You're just not going to like the performance. Sorry, the efficiency of the 1400K, rather.
Yeah. So I think the first issue is they needed to keep the performance. The whole efficiency angle that we were going for on the podcast is performance the same, efficiency better. Or alternatively, the performance is better at the same efficiency.
That was our reasonable, realistic take on it. We didn't say that would be a great success. We were saying realistically, this is probably the best we can hope for.
That's right. Yeah. Like for it to be a great success, they would need to obviously hit multiple different things at once.
I can see Tim being like,
that's how you get a great success, right?
Yeah, that's right.
But yeah, like the realistic expectation for Arrow, like the best that it probably was going to do was improve efficiency while keeping performance the same. And unfortunately, they improved efficiency, except in some situations, the performance isn't the same. It's worse.
And the efficiency isn't mind-blowing either.
Yeah, I think that also really hurt, the point of the product. Because I guess when people say, like, we're not satisfied, these comments that we're referring to in this segment, right? We're not satisfied with performance or efficiency. Like, we've got to hit both, which is not true. Like, one or the other could be fine. If they're going to target efficiency, and that's what we're looking for in a product, right? Like, we want this part to be more efficient. That's the goal. You need to at least match or beat your competitor in efficiency. And they didn't do that. Like, the Zen 5 parts that you were showing, and even some Zen 4 parts, are simply more efficient processors.
And we're talking about the desktop iterations of these things. We're not talking about the mobile versions or anything like that. Like, we're talking about the stuff.
I honestly have no idea how the mobile parts compare, but...
Yeah, we're talking about the stuff we've reviewed. I've just seen arguments where people are talking about, but at lower power levels, the efficiency's better, and therefore it's going to be better for mobile use.
Sure. Well, if that was true, they should have released them as 65 watt parts or something.
Well, all I'm getting at is if that is the case, fine, but we are strictly talking about the actual parts that we've reviewed and the parts that we're interested in.
Yeah.
So I just want to make that clear.
Yeah, so obviously the issue is if you're gunning for efficiency and you don't reach the level of your competitor, then it's always going to be underwhelming. Like if we want to promote the most efficient processor right now, it's not an Arrow Lake part.
Mm-hmm.
And so if that's the goal of the CPU and you don't reach the level it needs to be, it's not us flipping and suddenly saying, well, we want more performance. It's like it is more efficient. It's just it's not good at that.
Also, efficiency has never been the be-all and end-all. Like, okay, you may get that impression somehow because we talk about how inefficient the 14900K is, but that was absurd, right? Like, a reasonable improvement upon that doesn't make it a really efficient part, but it's a good improvement. We've headed in the right direction because we were so far out of control and beyond what was acceptable and reasonable in terms of power and thermals with that part that we're coming back to reality with this part.
Yeah.
But all that aside anyway, we don't care about which is the most efficient desktop. On the desktop, when I'd say price to performance is really the priority for most people.
Yeah.
And then as long as the efficiency is acceptable, not absurd, not
Yeah, and the reason why you were talking so much about efficiency with the previous reviews is that the 14900K and AMD processors were pretty similar in performance in a lot of circumstances.
Well, that's true.
So if you're looking at a lot of the productivity benchmarks, those parts were similar. In gaming, again, like the 14900K was often, at least relative to the non-X3D parts, was a little better versus X3D was, parity to a little slower. But it used way more power. So if you're looking at like a CPU and you're trying to, make recommendations to people and you've got the performance is similar, well, then you're going to go to all the other stuff. And when you see that the power efficiency is so far out of whack with the Intel part and the platform concerns and stuff, especially with older generation parts, that's why you would talk more about efficiency. But if one part was just so much more performant, then that would be the majority of the discussion. And if it was priced well, the efficiency would fall away. Like it would sort of be, there's an efficiency difference here. And let's be honest, like even though Arrow Lake isn't as efficient as Zen 4, it's not a problem. Like if the pricing and the performance was up to scratch, it would be fine. Yeah.
So what you're saying is we do a full product analysis.
Yeah.
We look at all the relevant things that you can compare product A and product B on.
Yep.
And we see how they compare. And then we break it down.
Yeah.
This one does this well. That's how we've always done it. So, and again, even in the Arrow Lake reviews, I said multiple times, the power efficiency is greatly improved here to the point where it is no longer a concern. Thermals are very easy to keep in check. Although in certain matchups here, AMD does have more power efficient parts like the X3D parts. Not really a point of contention anymore. Not really worth bringing up. They're so close now. They're both acceptable that I think desktop users no longer consider this a relevant factor. It's like close enough. What are the relevant factors? Price, performance, consistency of performance, platform features. And again, Intel's winning on platform features, so that's a tick for them. So you can add up all these things, but then, are a few more PCIe lanes worth worse performance and higher prices and that sort of stuff. And for some people, some use cases, that'll be the case, but not always.
Yeah, that's right. And I think, I guess the interesting thing with Arrow Lake and a lot of desktop parts is, and we were talking about this earlier when I rocked up here to do our Q&As and stuff, is I feel like Arrow Lake as a product was designed for a market that desktop products aren't for. I feel like there's, and maybe Zen 5 was thrown into this discussion as well. Not that it was designed for this, but a lot of reviews sort of were angling towards this being the case. But in my opinion, right now, boxed DIY desktop processors are primarily for gamers. And I know some people will say, I build a desktop to use for productivity as a workstation. I think that is the minority of people buying boxed desktop processors, that most people are buying these things to build gaming systems, or at least part of their system will be used for gaming. It might be a mixed use case, it might be purely gaming. gaming's a big part of it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So would you say that's true? Most people are buying these for gaming?
I don't know if that's true. In my experience, that's certainly true. On a global stage, I'm not I can't point to like a Steam survey. Obviously, Steam's gaming, but there's nothing I can really point to as evidence of that, other than my own like anecdotal evidence.
Yeah.
Like all the people I know that build and buy computers, they're primarily gaming on it. Some of them are doing like CAD work, but then they game as well. So
Yep.
I agree with what you're saying. There's nothing I can point to that says definitively, yes, you are correct on that.
I think the reason why I'm leaning towards thinking that is just looking at sales of things like X3D processors kind of blowing most other parts out of the water.
It seems to suggest that that's the case, yeah.
And also, to be very clear, I'm specifically talking about boxed DIY processors that you would use to build your own PC, not the overall CPU market, because obviously the processors also go into pre-builts and OEM systems where those are generally used for other things because they can be sold to
business use computers and stuff. I mean, that's why they had to add an iGPU, for example, to the parts so they could be used for business.
Yeah, exactly. So, but I think for boxed processors, again, this is not based on like in-depth research or anything, but my guess is that most of these are sold for gamers. And so when I look at the parts, the Arrow Lake parts, and I look at pricing and performance and what the products are doing, as I mentioned earlier, the parts, their strength is some niche productivity workloads. You might get a workload where it's really good, and then the Arrow Lake part's the best, so you might get the Arrow Lake part. And it looks like the pricing is designed for that reality as well, because the pricing is not that competitive for gaming. It's clearly not priced for gamers. It's priced for productivity buyers. And so that's a really weird scenario because desktop DIY buyers are buying these things for gaming, and the price, which really only applies to DIY buyers, is just not set up for that customer at all. So they've basically set it up to fail with the pricing.
Yep.
Because let's be honest, Dell, HP, who are buying these to put into business systems if they're really good for that, or workstations or whatever, they're going to be buying 50,000, 100,000 units. They're not paying $600 a pop for that CPU. Like they're getting a nice bulk deal discount. They work directly with Intel to get discounted CPUs. That's how it's always worked. And so the pricing that they set for the consumer market should be based on the consumer use case, which is primarily for gaming.
Well, there's a lot of merit to what you're saying, because there'll be someone that's listening to this that strongly disagrees. Like, oh, Tim, you're overstating how many people game. Okay, let's go with that. So what percentage of people who are buying boxed CPUs game? If you're trying to tell me it's less than 50%, get out. Like, there's just no way. Tim's saying it's the vast, vast, vast majority, which I think is correct. But if it's incorrect, you're not miles off. The majority of people buying these are doing some form of gaming. That seems pretty clear. And there are plenty of things you can point to that support that, like the sale of X3D chips, which typically
and just
aren't
the sale
great
of
productivity.
The best value gaming CPUs
Also,
almost always sell the best.
Also YouTube channels, right?
Yeah.
We've been quite a successful YouTube channel by heavily focusing on constantly updating and overhauling our benchmark data, which you traditionally didn't see with tech sites. And when I was when I was heavily invested in just doing tech site content, I wasn't updating the results nearly as much as we do now. There was a lot of carrying over of older data and stuff like that, whereas that we absolutely do not do that at Hardware Unboxed. So if we were focused on Linux benchmarks, and that's all we did. GearSeekers is great for that stuff, by the way. There's others, but level 1 techs.
Yep.
But if we focused on that exclusively, do you think we'd get as many views as we do on our day one content if it wasn't primarily gaming focused? If we had essentially no gaming benchmarks and we did productivity stuff like content creation, server benchmarks, development stuff, AI, if we focused on all of that stuff, do you think we'd get as many views as we get?
No
We'd
way.
get like 1,000 views, a couple of thousand views. So clearly a lot of people who are researching these box CPUs and stuff like that are interested in gaming, which is why channels that do a lot of gaming benchmarks get the views.
Yeah, and I think you can have, as part of your lineup, products that are focused towards other things. And this is where I think AMD's lineup is quite strong, is that Yeah, the 7950X, the 9950X are not priced for gamers. They are clearly priced based on their productivity performance because relative to the 8 and 6 core models, they're not faster for gaming.
Yeah, it's a more diverse approach.
Yeah, but they're offering something else for gamers. They're saying gamers 7800 X3D, 7600, the upcoming 9800 X3D, buy that. And then if you need the other things, we've got them. Whereas Arrow Lake, where's the gaming specific part?
Yeah, AMD's managed to make like modular CPUs. Like it was a meme initially, like, well, no, it wasn't really, but Intel tried to make it one by the glued together CPUs. But it's,
look at them now.
well, I don't mean to have a go at Intel or bring that up. I'm just mean like that.
It was a talking point for sure.
Yeah, that approach to CPU design, how well they've refined it now, and it is become sort of the modular CPU. Like whack some more L3 on that one, now it's a gaming beast. Whack another CCD on that one, now it's a productivity beast. Like there's so many, and then don't do either of those things. Just have an IO die and one CCD, and you've got yourself a good value, cost-effective CPU. Doesn't cost much to produce. What are they selling 7600s for these days? Like, I think I've seen them go for under $200 already.
Yep. I think just under 200.
Yeah. So, and they could sell them for a lot less than that. They just don't need to because they've got AM4 picking up the slack at the entry level. And so it's worked out unbelievably well. Really well. So.
Yeah. And I think with Arrow Lake, like it's all, you could make the 285K the productivity option, price it for productivity, but you'd need another part in the lineup that is designed for what people actually buy these CPUs for, which is for gaming. And you look at even down to the 245K, the Core Ultra 5 part.
It's too slow.
It's just not good enough.
Yeah, there's not enough L3 cache there. It drops off way too much. People have pointed it to being the 6 cores. I don't think it's that. I don't know. There's definitely testing we could do to work that out.
Well, it's possibly a case where because the memory latency appears to be worse and memory performance appears to be a regression compared to the 14th gen, it's possible that these CPUs are relying more on cache than previous Intel generations. Because we've seen with like Zen, for example, that Zen seems to benefit more from cache advancements than Intel. You've shown that scaling before. From
about the 6th generation, somewhere in there, up to the 10th generation, when I did the cores versus cache benchmarks, we found that although they both scaled quite well, the cache was more responsible for the performance uplifts when going from like a 8700K to a 9900K. So the cache there was really beneficial, the increased L3 cache capacity. But then when I redid the testing with 12th gen and 13th gen and 14th gen, not so much. It was more about just the core count or the frequency of the cores. The L3 cache seemed to play far less of a role. So that was interesting. It was like the sort of the Core i5 had a sufficient amount for the way that it handled its memory and the way that the architecture operated. So adding more with the i7 and the i9, there was a small performance uplift, but it wasn't anywhere near as substantial as what we saw with the previous architectures.
And it moved to DDR5, which is interesting that happened around then.
Yep, that can also play a role. So it would be interesting to do that testing again with multiple different P-core and E-core configurations with differing L3 cache capacities across those 3 models and see how that all plays out.
Yeah, because it's a possibility, and this is just my theory, that we've seen with Zen 5 and those sorts of parts and Zen 4 that cache is so important because the memory side of the Ryzen design, it isn't the strength of the CPU. I think it's probably fair to say that the strength of Ryzen has been in other parts, and Intel has generally had the better memory controllers in terms of overall performance. They can...
Well, the larger L3 cache reduces the bottleneck, let's say, that's created by the Infinity Fabric.
Yeah, that's right.
The bandwidth limitations across that.
If you look at Arrow Lake, they've now effectively got their own Infinity Fabric of sorts because of this tiled design. So it's possible that the cache, and we're just speculating, spitballing here now, that the cache is going to play more of a role. And if the Ultra 5 doesn't have enough of it, then it's going to be hurt more than what would have been the case with the previous generation.
That's right, because it seems unlikely that Windows scheduling issues would have hurt that part more than the parts with more
that would just be a
peoples
flat,
and more...
we're going to smash you by this much across the board.
Yeah, it'd either affect that part less or the same, but not more.
Yeah, so I think that'll be interesting to see how that sort of testing goes. But that's probably the reason why the Ultra 5 part isn't that compelling. But that's the part that they really needed to bring it back to the pricing discussion. That's the part they really needed to target towards gamers. And yeah, if the performance wasn't up to scratch, you have to get the pricing right. You have to make at least one of these parts for gamers to go, okay, I want a budget. Like, let's say you're a gamer, right? Mm-hmm. I want a budget system that's good for gaming. It doesn't have to be top tier performance. Like, I'm not interested in spending $400 and whatever on a 7800 X3D. I want good gaming performance, modern features like DDR5, good platform. Productivity performance. As long as that's acceptable, I'm okay. I just want something that fits that criteria. A 245K could be that, but not at the price that they're selling it for, which is like $300?
Yeah, which again is the sort of the same problem for the whole stack, in my opinion.
Yeah. So what would you say?
I think I spitballed and worked it out in my video, but it was a substantial discount on all parts for them to make sense, providing that the mixed performance was addressed as well. So Windows scheduling was improved, or whatever they need to do there, thread director stuff. But yeah, I think I put the price around $250 to $200, somewhere in that range, which is dirt cheap compared to what it is. But that I wouldn't entertain that thing for any less than that. But then I also don't know how much the Z890 motherboards are going to cost. I haven't looked at those yet online, so I imagine...
Yeah, that's right. Probably pretty pricey.
Well, they should be for sale. I could look it up right now, but it doesn't matter because I imagine that they're not dirt cheap.
And the B-Series boards aren't available.
No, they'll be probably coming out around January next year, I imagine.
Yeah.
January, February.
Yeah, because we'll probably get the non-K models around then as well.
Yeah, like CES, they'll probably be announced. So...
Another thing that I want to chat about is the difference between the Arrow Lake reviews and the Zen 5 reviews. Because, again, people, I don't know, have mixed feelings about us bringing up comments on the podcast, but some, let's say...
Well, it's what we talk about. The podcast is what we talk about.
So some AMD fanboys were a little upset.
You just go straight out there.
Little upset is probably putting it lightly as well.
Yeah.
That, I guess, Intel exaggerated performance in their marketing, AMD exaggerated performance in their marketing as well for both the CPU launches. However, you were much lighter in your feedback towards Intel versus AMD. And with AMD, you were sort of calling it more of a flop overall, whereas with Intel, you were giving them a bit more leniency to improve the part that you didn't give with Zen 5. So explain yourself.
Yeah, see, I'd have to watch the reviews back to back because I personally didn't feel that way. I felt like in the Zen 5, like let's say the first review, because the Zen 5 story, I don't know how to put it. It got bad, right? But that wasn't my fault.
Yeah.
It was because AMD heavily suggested that the administrator account solved the problem. Like it was a Windows-based problem, which I was happy to hear. Great. That's good. It's going to fix this. And then I dig a bit deeper. No, it doesn't. But AMD were kind of like, oh, no, you don't have to test Zen 4. Just test Zen 5. And then, one thing led to another and we just got, sent down this rabbit hole of, and now I'll get to that in a minute anyway. But that was the Zen 5 review. I thought, I don't know, I didn't feel like it was much more negative than the Arrow Lake review. And I say that because while I was disappointed that the product it under-delivered what AMD promised. So I guess that's a huge point, right? It under-delivered on what AMD promised. The price was not good.
Yep.
There was the whole 65-watt debacle as well on top of that created a heap of confusion. You didn't get a box cooler with it as well, which hurt the value.
Yeah, the efficiency thing,
that wasn't there.
Is it really efficient?
That was and that was kind of the problem with Zen 5. There were a lot of these BS-y type things around it. Like it's 40% more efficient. No, it's not. It's 10 to 15% faster for gaming. No, it's not. Disabling SMT makes it way faster. No, it doesn't. And the list just goes on and on and on. Even once we've got the branch prediction code that solves Zen 5 Windows 11 performance, kind of. It's more of a Zen branch prediction thing if you want.
Yeah.
I'm not even sure how much of the branch prediction plays into it. I personally think there was security mitigations that were hastily patched into Windows 11 23H2 that hurt Ryzen performance quite substantially, especially for the newer processors. And 24H2 baked them in at a more optimized level, and that improved Ryzen's performance. I think that's more likely what happened. Well, because what they absolutely weren't was Zen 5 optimizations.
Yeah, that's right. That's just not true.
So that's also not true. So you got all of this stuff. And then on top of it, AMD with their I don't know why they wanted to misdirect. I mean, I guess I do know why to a degree, but it was sort of, it's not how it's a disconnect to my personal experience with AMD, I suppose. In the past, when we've gone, the gaming performance with the Zen Plus architecture in this example is not as good as we'd like, and they look into it and, your results are right. We'll see if there's anything that can be done about that. And they were pretty open and honest. It was like a very community vibe. And they were just heavy misdirected every turn. So I feel like AMD made an underwhelming... Well, first of all, they created the situation that led to the product being very underwhelming.
Yep.
And then they did themselves no favors in sort of when people were like, hang on, this is very underwhelming. It's not 15% faster. And like, there must be something wrong. We'll try and help you work it out. And then they couldn't tell us, and been down that rabbit hole. So with Intel, they kind of came out straight away and said, parity, kind of best case scenario. They didn't use the term best case scenario, but that's implied with any of these companies when we work with them. It's a given that they're showing us the best case scenario. So when they say parity, we're like, oof, it's going to be about 5% slower. So the expectation was set low. When we found the results we found and we communicated the various issues we had, Intel was like, yep, we're aware of the issues. We're working with media on them. The results. So we're trying to work on solutions. We'll get back to you type thing. But they kind of verified what we were saying was right. Like, so there was no confusion there. There was disappointment, but both of them were disappointing. So, and again, like in both examples, I said, don't buy these products. They're not good value. I specifically stated that this Intel CPU is very underwhelming, very disappointing, and you should not buy it. What you should buy is an AMD CPU.
Yeah, I feel like there's sort of two levels of the disappointment and negativity in your reviews. So I feel like the AMD review was sort of maximum negativity around the marketing, the release strategy, the communication. Like that was, I think that quite clearly came across in your review. Like,
I hope so.
Did not appreciate that at all. The CPU was disappointing, but it was, I think you even said like, you acknowledge that at some point these products are probably the parts that you'll get. They will get cheaper. The other parts will fall away from the market.
Right now, don't buy them, but they're not bad products. Like,
it was more like
it's a disappointing.
Buy Zen 4 now. At some point in the future, maybe you'll buy Zen 5. Whereas with Arrow Lake, I feel like the review was communication and marketing and stuff middling. Like it's a bit more disappointing than what Intel showed, but nothing outrageous. Like communication okay. But then the product was just a flat no. Like, I think you said things like, maybe if they improve a few of the performance issues and drop the price, then maybe you would buy it.
Yeah. It was a long shot.
But I feel like with the Zen 5 reviews, it was more like, don't buy now, but at some point, probably.
Yeah, it's not a bad product. It's a disappointing product. Right now, the pricing is bad. Once Zen 4 gets filtered out, hopefully Zen 5 will pick up at that price point. At that point, it'd be worth buying. But, and we talked about this in the Q&A, and this is a factor, right? It's not the factor of the review. But we're somewhat invested in AM5 at this point, right? Like, we were pretty happy with Zen 4. Zen 4 improved over time. DDR5 pricing improved. Motherboard pricing improved. CPU prices came down. We'd been recommending them for a while, and there was the promised platform longevity. So there's an investment there in that platform. So we want to see this platform grow like AM4 did. We want to see great CPU upgrade paths. We want
to check that AMD's keeping up with the promise as well.
Yeah. Well, that's right. They've promised platform longevity, and that part of that actually meaning anything is getting a platform that's worth investing in initially, and then continuing to get a good upgrade path. So, but in any case, the viewers and myself to a degree are invested in this platform. We want to see it grow. We want to see it improve. We don't want to see stagnation.
Yeah.
So there's some level of investment there, whether you want to admit it or not. It's there.
Yeah.
With Arrow Lake, there is no investment. It's like, this is a new thing. You've got to try and sell it to us. Oh, it's no good. All right. Cool. Well, I guess see you in 2 years, or good luck trying to improve it. But there aren't people already on that platform looking at upgrade paths and stuff like that. So it's, again, I'm not saying this is the factor. It's just a factor.
Yeah.
However big or small you want to make it, it's another factor that adds to the disappointment of Zen 5, whereas it's less disappointing with Arrow Lake because there's no investment there. And I'm not talking about emotional investment. I'm talking about...
Yeah, it's like people that have bought a motherboard getting burnt or not by the parts that come out.
Yeah, and again, you're not guaranteed anything with AM5, but we saw what happened with AM4. We're hoping for a repeat of that. Nothing's guaranteed. And then prior to the release of these as well, they did extend that platform to 2027 plus. So you sort of hope that there's going to be something that comes out of that. So anyway, there's all that as well. But I mean, yeah, I think if you are, you're not biased towards either brand or whatever it may be, and you're looking at this in a truly neutral way, which is what the people that would be making this claim are trying to suggest we're not doing. I think if you're doing that, you're just like, yeah, look, both reviews were negative. Hardware Unboxed was clearly disappointed with both products. They said, don't buy either product. And in both examples, they said, buy the AMD product that makes sense. It's not like we're like, oh, Arrow Lake's not that good. Keep buying the 14900K, guys, because it's the world's best gaming CPU. All you have to do is tune it. If you know how to memory tune, it's like better than a next generation product. Buy that. Like, we're not saying nonsense like that. We're saying that the 7700, the 7700X are much better value than the 9700X. For you, they will deliver very similar gaming performance and application desktop performance at a 40% discount. So that sounds pretty good. But that does make this next generation a bit disappointing.
Yeah, I feel like there's a lot of, I guess, analysis of the specific words that you use that I think is a bit silly with these things. Like, often if you will say something is bad versus terrible, then there'll be a lot of like, oh, well, he was more negative calling something terrible as opposed to bad, or like it's a flop or maybe a flop. Or
flop is such a harsh word, apparently.
It's pretty harsh.
Yeah, apparently it's a really bad word. I did not know.
So yeah, I think there's a lot of over analyzing of the language. Like when we write reviews and things, like it's kind of written in the moment. Like I'm not going back and looking and being like, oh, okay, so I said that product was terrible, so now I've got to use an even more
turbo terrible.
Yeah, like I've got to match the language. Like we don't go into that level of detail on the review language. What matters is whether we recommend the product or not, and what we are recommending. That's the most brutal part of a review. If we say don't buy this other part, that is as brutally negative as it can really get. It doesn't matter what else we say. That is the takeaway from the review. Yeah,
the only way you'd have a leg to stand on with that sort of criticism is if we said something like, look, Arrow Lake doesn't look particularly great now, but Intel's promised us that Windows update coming that will fix performance, and they're working on an updated firmware that will address this. So we think it's worth investing in. Like we think you guys should get this because promises Intel's made. And we didn't say anything like that for AMD. But yeah, as Tim said, if it's these little things, but ultimately we're saying the same thing, it's just like, it's kind of...
Yeah, I feel like it's come up. How many times has it come up in like NVIDIA GPU reviews where people get upset that we're not focusing enough on ray tracing or something, even though in like every single GPU review that you have made, you're like, if you care about ray tracing, buy an NVIDIA GPU. It's like,
And
even
they'll also say, like, Gamers Nexus does a great job, which we think they do. They're more unbiased than Harbor Unbox, because this why Harbor Unbox sucks is because they don't put enough weight on ray tracing. Then you go to the GN review and there's like one ray tracing title, and Steve doesn't even mention. He's like, yeah, it's not worth it. I'm like, he said the same thing.
yeah, I know, it's crazy.
And like Steve from Gamers Nexus will occasionally like DM me like screenshots, and he's like, mate, I watched both of our reviews. I don't know what they're on about. I'm like, they just don't like me. I don't know what to tell you.
Yeah. Oh, well, that could be part of it.
So, and it goes both ways, though. I see people who bash GN as well and say that we do a better job because of reasons. And then I look at it, I'm like,
it's like pretty much the same
thing. They said
thing.
the same thing. So
yeah, it's just like, I guess people just, when you say like short statements, like I know in a lot of the conclusion of your GPU, like NVIDIA GPU reviews, it's a lot about the other stuff. Like it's about, the performance and the pricing, and, ray tracing is part of it. And then there's obviously upscaling. There's all sorts of things you have to cover with the GPU. And when you clearly state, do not buy, like basically you're putting a big siren on the screen saying, do not
Giant
buy
disclaimer.
AMD if you like ray tracing.
Yeah.
You couldn't be any clearer about that opinion. But then it's all, oh yeah, but ultimately you recommended, you might have said that whatever NVIDIA product is not good value overall. It's like, well, there's always a lot of nuance with these discussions. People have very different preferences for different things that they like in products, especially graphics cards. Like if you do multiplayer or single player gaming, it completely changes the discussion about these things. And the conclusion of these reviews is designed to cater not just for what we personally like, because let's be honest, I think your reviews, if you were catering, especially for a GPU review, to what you like, you would trash ray tracing pretty hard.
Yeah.
A lot harder than you have in the reviews.
Yeah.
So,
well, I'd only be testing competitive shooters at low quality settings.
yeah.
So that's not great. It's not a great review.
Well, it would be a great review for multiplayer gamers interested in that sort of thing.
That's right. I guess you're right. So,
but that's why we say it depends, and I'm wearing the it depends hoodie a lot in reviews. And I've seen people saying like, I don't have to watch this Hardware Unboxed review. I know what they're going to say. At the end, they're going to say, it depends on this factor. It may or may not be good. But the truth is that is genuinely the case for most products. It really does depend on what you look for in a product and the things that you preference. And
except for Arrow Lake, it didn't depend.
Well, in Arrow Lake, it didn't really depend because there was very few
redeeming qualities.
I feel like with most products, I try and look for an angle that I could recommend the product for. Like even if it's overall generally bad.
Well, part of your conclusion, you do that. You don't form the review around trying to sell it.
It's more like, for most people, like for a monitor review, I'd say something along the lines of, for most people, I wouldn't recommend this product. I would recommend alternate product instead. But if you're in this niche, you might consider this product because of the things that it does especially well. But that's, you try and review the product from the general use cases. Like you think about, if you're a mixed user, you would get this product. If you're just a gamer, you would get a different product. If you're just do productivity, there's different considerations. And so that's what the conclusions of reviews are like. But people they find ways to...
Well, the greatest, to pivot a tiny bit here, one of the greatest misconceptions, though I'm not sure how much of a misconception it is, it's more of a dummy spit. So by a dummy spit, I mean, you haven't said a thing I agree with, or you've said a negative thing about a product I like, so therefore this opinion. But one of the misconceptions or dummy spits that I see is people saying that reviews like Arrow Lake or even Zen 5 are negative because it makes us more money. Like it sells views. So... there's this misconception that negative YouTube reviews and negative YouTube content benefits us. Now, I don't think this is completely misguided. I think this stems from, what would you call them, like commentary type channels that are always like, Mr. Beast did a thing, and they do like 40 outrage videos, and their channel is just built on drama.
There's a lot of those gaming ones where there's like they might just do like 20 Ubisoft videos about Ubisoft does insert bad thing.
Well, those as well. I'm not familiar with them because I don't watch them, but
neither do
I know they're prevalent on YouTube. So maybe people who are in those circles and see a lot of that content just think that it's all about drama, and because the news stations as well, it's all about fear or whatever. I think it was. I haven't watched a news station in about 15 years because
probably of that reason.
Who does? But I think because that happens in a lot of circles, but in our space, especially because we're hobbyists and we love what we do and we're passionate about the industry, we don't want to see bad products. We want to see good products. We want to recommend you guys good products because ultimately my assumption is people are watching us because they're interested in buying or upgrading their computer.
Yeah.
Not because they want to see, did Tim brush his hair today or something like they want to know about the products, right?
Yeah.
They're not watching it for our personality or us. They trust that we do, in-depth testing and accurate testing, and therefore they come to us to find out how products.
You've got a personality-driven channel. I'm not the person for that.
So really, we want the products to be good so we can recommend the products. We don't want to recommend bad products. And
that's just that is the fundamental difference between a consumer product review channel or website or whatever and a entertainment or
like
opinion
influencer type thing.
Yeah, like I guess the difference between like commentary versus reviews, they're not the same. Like commentary, if your channel is built around commentary and just chatting about like what's the industry like at the moment,
like news and all that sort of stuff,
news sort of things, like what's the latest scandal, what's the latest investigative reporting, that's very different to product reviews. And this is why I think, at least I have a lot of opinions about how some other people review that we've talked about privately, and about how, at least in my opinion, someone that does news coverage is not necessarily the best person to do a review because they are so different and it's a very different skill and type of content that you're making. And so what works on a news channel and what people are interested in for news, it can be the negative stories, the bad stuff. Like if you're just interested in what's happening in the industry, and you want to know, like, I'm interested in Arrow Lake, but I'm kind of, I'm not interested in buying a CPU right now. I just want to know what it's like. Yeah, you might fit into the negativity a bit because you want to meme on it in your chat. And, you want to, I saw those Arrow Lake reviews. Wasn't it so funny that the products were slower than the previous generation? Ha ha ha. Like, that's what that sort of channel lives on. But our channel, I feel like a video for me is successful. Like, I'm happy with the video if at the end I feel like I haven't wasted people's time. I feel like if I'm not recommending a product to someone in some way, I've kind of wasted their time. Like if you watch a whole video of mine and at the end the conclusion is, well, don't buy that, I could have told you in the first minute of the review and saved you 20 minutes of time, right? But the idea is to watch the video so you understand why the product's bad, but then what the actual genuine alternative is. Like if you were potentially interested in this, we're going to show you why the other product is actually the better choice. So at the end, you at least have some useful information. You can come away from an Arrow Lake review, for example, going, well, I shouldn't buy Arrow Lake, I should buy Zen 4.
Yeah, so, yeah, that's right. So people think because we crapped on Zen 5 for being underwhelming and the AMD marketing being highly misleading, and that content did get some attention, it did get some good views, so therefore we really want to lean into that. We want everything to suck so we can beat on it and get good views, but that's not actually the case. So far all I've said is that's not the case, but let me explain and give some examples. So I talked about this on X, and this is less opinion based and more like you can dig in and see the facts and statistics for yourself. Like it's easily verifiable information to prove that the misconception is just that. So 11th gen, Intel makes very popular CPUs. 9th gen was popular, 10th gen was popular. Along comes 11th gen, which that was the famous poo emoji in the thumbnail. We crapped on that. Bad product, shouldn't have been released. Very, 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 very bad product. Do not recommend. Negative review. Bad, bad, bad. Okay?
Yep.
To this day, I think that video has 200-ish thousand views, maybe, something like that. As a consequence, we couldn't do any motherboard roundups featuring the 11th gen processors. We couldn't do any buying guides featuring the 11th gen processors. We couldn't do any live streams. We didn't really do any benchmark head-to-heads. I did like maybe one. No one cared about how the 11900K performed relative to the competing AMD part because they just knew it sucks, get the competing AMD part. So there was no intrigue, there was no interest, there was no reason for follow-up content because it was a product that everyone knew sucked and it wasn't worth buying. So it wasn't like we were like, yes, thank God that product sucked. That was so many easy free views, awesome stuff for us. It was like, well, that sucks. That's disappointing because I was really hoping that this would be a cool product that we could look at for years to come. So that's one example. Then you get a part like the 5800X3D. So that review has many more views on the original review because the review was positive and it was a product worth buying. So people kept watching 5800X3D content well into the future. We did exactly 1,745 videos with 5800X3D in the title, and a lot of people called us AMD Unboxed for that and silly things like that. But it wasn't because we're AMD Unboxed. It was because all of our viewers kept requesting, almost to an infuriating degree, that everything we do had to somehow, even if it was a CPU cooler review, was that tested on the 5800X3D? Do a keyboard review. Not that we did those, but if we did, it'd be like, was that computer that you were testing the keyboard on, did that have a 5800X3D in it? Like everything had to have a 5800X3D because so many people bought it. So many people were interested in it ongoing, and so many people on AM4 were interested in getting one. So there was people that had them that were still interested in them. And it was just, there was a huge amount of interest in that part. So because it was an interesting, exciting part, we did extremely well off the 5800X3D and could basically make content for the next 2 years on that part. So that's an example where we prefer, great parts. Now, there are examples of crap products or dodgy products like the DDR4 version of the GT 1030. That video did pretty well initially because we were crapping on it and we were exposing it. But that was more because you were exposing almost like a fraud. But even then, we only ever made one video on it. There was no buying guides. There was no build guides. There was no follow-up content. Yeah. We basically exposed the scam and then moved on.
Yeah, I think once it's known that a product is bad, all interest evaporates.
Yeah, it's gone.
From that.
Done.
Like, you don't need to make a second video. Like, for example, right, the 11900K or whatever it came out. People figure out it's bad. They get the performance data. They're like, okay, this is bad. Do you really need 11900K versus AMD part to further confirm that it's bad? Like people aren't interested in in-depth content further confirming something that was already confirmed.
Yeah, that's right. Most recently the XTs, we did the same thing.
Yeah. So, but with a positive product, a good product, people want to figure out more about. They want to learn more. Like think about when you're.
I'm saving up for this. I want to invest in this. Tell me everything you can.
Yeah, when you're buying a product, right? And I remember back in the days where you used to buy a lot more PC hardware. These days, it's a little different working for Hardware Unboxed, right? But you think about buying a product and, even when it's like in the mail, I was like looking at reviews and content and being like, okay, I'm so hyped for this. Like I want to know as much as I possibly can about it. But for the products that I quickly took out of the race for when I was purchasing a product, I'm not looking at any further up content for that. It's like a couple of videos or a couple of articles back in the day kind of confirms that decision. But once you're interested in it, it's like, I'll look at like 20 reviews.
Well, it seems to be the case. A lot of people do that.
So yeah, with like follow-up content, once you're sort of interested, I think the way that our reviews go, right, is the initial review is probably going to go through a handful of CPUs in a handful of games. But then people want to know like, okay, well, maybe the games I'm interested in weren't in that day one review. So then the 50-game benchmark comes in, and that's when you get more context around it. Like, we've given you a margin that's probably pretty close. But with 50 games, we can really give you a true, much more accurate picture. So that video usually does really well for a good part. And then those videos are typically a head-to-head comparison. So then you can make maybe 2 or 3 of those looking at all the most relevant battles between the good processor and other good or mediocre or whatever processors that you're interested in. And so that just generates more content. And then, as you say, it gets into the CPU buying guide. It gets into the motherboard roundups. It gets into the builds, which we haven't really done for a little while, but I'd love to do, live stream builds and that sort of thing more of. And so it flows on and on and on. And then it comes to the point where 2 years later, people still have the parts, so they're still interested in revisits. They want to know, how good's my processor for the next game that's coming out, the games of today. So, yeah, the difference would be, like, in terms of actually making money for the channel, just night and day. Good products make us a substantial amount more money.
Yeah, even in motherboards, for example, the B450 Tomahawk, that board we recommended, Gamers Nexus recommended, a few others. We made a few videos on the B450 Tomahawk, testing various different CPUs and stuff. All that content blew up, did extremely well. MSI basically said they couldn't make enough of them. But then we've exposed other boards for being terrible. And while, there was some initial interest in that content, died off pretty quickly. I don't know the views, but if you look at some of those negative VRM videos that we did, I guarantee you they have nowhere near the views of the content looking at something like a B450 Tomahawk. So that's one way you can verify whether, negative reviews do better than positive reviews, because you quickly work out they don't. Also, further supporting that is stuff like Google Trends. So if you go to Google Trends right now and you type in 5800X3D, 7800X3D, 11900K, and 285K, you're going to find some really interesting trending data. But yeah, basically the 5800X smokes the Intel stuff in terms of trending interest, and then the 7800X3D goes to another level. So,
yeah.
And I expect that the 9800X3D will probably do a similar thing. And it's because, well, I don't know about the 9800X3D yet, but those other two CPUs were good products.
Yeah.
And therefore, even today, even after it's stopped really going on sale, there's still huge interest in it. People obviously want to buy them secondhand, or
they
have them.
Longevity.
Also, just a lot of people own them. And when a lot of people own them, is it time to upgrade yet?
And good word of mouth. This relates back into, not that I want to get into this topic, but just briefly, this relates back into why products like the 7900 XT were such a fail, because you need to nail the launch to get people into this ecosystem. Like, we're talking about this ecosystem of good content, right? Like, the good review leads into follow-up content. It leads into more investigations. It leads into buying guides. It leads into testing related components, right? If you stuff the first part of that up, people do not care about the rest of that stuff.
That's the problem we've got now with Arrow Lake.
And that's going to be that was the problem with parts like the Radeon RX 7900 XT. If you stuff up that launch, you could fix it later, but you've cooked all that content.
Yeah, you have. Yeah.
And so that's why AMD need to nail those launches better.
Yeah, in terms of like in terms of mind share and all that sort of stuff, it's irreversible damage.
Yeah, exactly.
So
when products come out like 5800 XGD, that review was very positive at launch. 7800 XGD, very positive at launch. That's when this whole cycle of positivity, and again, like, even ignoring the financial side of things, the view side of things, I personally find it much more enjoyable to make a positive review. Like, I think people think that YouTubers, we revel in dumping on these products, and we love making thumbnails with poo emojis in them, which, I don't mind making a thumbnail with a poo emoji in it. I think it's kind of funny.
Like, Tim, no.
It's kind of funny, but I would much rather make a positive review. Rather. Like, I get so much more out of making positive reviews. And the view side of things come separately to that. Like, generally they do better, but also it's just nicer to read comments where people are like, "I'm so hyped about this product. I'm so interested in buying this or upgrading this." Like, negativity is negativity. It's not fun. Like, you might get a brief bit of dopamine from, we shat on that, so that wasn't that nice, but then that dies away instantly.
Yeah, I don't even get that.
Whereas hype, it's more
depression for me.
Yeah.
So anyway, but yeah, misconception for sure on that one. It's whether you like it or not, it's actually not good for business.
Yeah.
So
we'd like good products. We'd like Arrow Lake to get better, and there's obviously opportunities. it's not a full write-off. They could improve it through pricing adjustments. They probably will have to. But then again, it doesn't seem like they've made too many of the parts, at least based on what we're hearing with availability issues.
And just lastly, I saw a couple of people comment saying that what we're saying here is all undone. That's not true, because stuff like the 13th, 14th Gen Disaster was so massive for views, which it sort of was, sort of wasn't. But again, that's more short-term gains. Like you see the views pile in and then it dies off. But
you can't make follow-up content beyond when the story's over, though. Yeah,
and that's not even about the product being bad. Like the product had been reviewed. This was about it was an ongoing thing. But it was about something that really a disaster in the industry that hadn't really happened before. Yeah. Like that's what that was about.
Well, and the thing is, the reason why you made so many videos about that is that it was a developing story. So, and it wasn't a developing story as in it took like a week and then it was done. It took months to get to the bottom of that. And there were many updates. There required testing. There was talking to board manufacturers. There was Intel releasing multiple different statements over time. So there was many different things that needed to be covered. And so we were following that as it went. So we were covering the videos and making videos as it popped up. It was
such an extreme, unheard of situation.
Yeah, and once that is a finalized, finished thing, like we've talked about the stability issue, we're not making stability issue follow-up videos. We're not going, hey guys, remember the 14900K?
No one would watch them anyway.
Yeah,
it's done and dusted. And again, even if you take that specific example, grab all the content that we made surrounding that situation, which might have been it was at least 2 videos, maybe 3. If you chuck in some Q&A questions, whatever. But
there's a Q&A, there was the Computex video, and there's a few other benchmarks that you did.
Grab all of that content, bundle it together. I guarantee you can find one video on our channel with 5800X3D in the title. It has more views than all of it combined.
Yeah.
And the channel was much bigger when we made the Intel content.
Yeah, I think your B650 buying guide has like 1 million views. It's pretty close, or would be pretty close to that.
Yeah, and I wouldn't have that if the platform wasn't worth investing in. Like if it was an Arrow Lake situation in reverse.
Yeah, that video would have died.
Would have bombed. It would have got like 40,000 views and been dead. So,
yeah. Well, I think that pretty much covers Arrow Lake, doesn't it? Unless you've got anything else interesting to say.
Not off the top of my head. I'm looking forward to the next podcast. It was good that we got to do this in person. It was not planned for episode 50. I always laugh in the podcast comments when people suggest that it's weird that we make it look like we're not in the same building when we are. Like that's some sort of thing we're trying to achieve.
Oh, people think that we're in the same building.
Haven't you seen? I see those comments a lot where people are like, it's weird that these guys film in the same building, but they try to make it look like they're not.
People think that?
I've seen those.
I'm so shocked at this revelation because it's just not.
It makes no sense. But yeah, I reply to them. I'm like, no, Tim's like a 3-hour drive away from me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so my video is filmed on my set. Is not in this building that we're filming.
No, we built today. 2 studios, one for me and one for Tim.
Yeah.
Similar overall size, structure. But yeah, Tim's set's very different to mine, which we would love if we lived within an hour of one another. Or less, I'd probably set up like a podcast set, like, comfortable seating and stuff, 2 camera angles, and we'd do it like a proper podcast. But yeah, it's at least 5-hour round trip?
Yeah.
At least a 5-hour round trip for Tim and I to visit one another. So we only do it once a month.
And neither of us wants to move close to one another. You can stay out.
I'm happy with Tim. It's kind of a proximity thing that we but yeah, that's sort of it. But as luck would have it, this time we were doing the Q&A stuff. We decided to make the Q&As a bit shorter this month, only doing 2 episodes instead of 3, so that freed up a bit of time for us. And we thought rather than film this thing first thing Friday morning, we'd do it Thursday afternoon and in person. So unfortunately, this isn't going to be a thing you'll see next week. It won't be a regular thing, but
it'll happen every once in a while.
Yeah, I don't even know if it's better than how we normally do it. It's possibly much the same.
Yeah, well, hopefully it's much the same.
Yeah. Well, if it's a lot better, I'm sorry to tell you, it's probably not happening again. You'll have to wait another 50 episodes, so hang in there.
Yeah, no, it'll be good. Yeah, next week's episode is going to be good because we'll be able to talk about the 9800X3D.
Yep.
So yeah, those reviews will be done and we'll be able to chat more, and they'll give more context around Arrow Lake and things like that. There'll be a lot more comparison things to talk about there. So
And then we'll work
that'll be
up
good.
towards the end of the year, and then
Yeah.
early next year should be insane for new hardware.
Yep.
So I'm looking forward to all of that. So we're busy. But anyway,
Cool.
It was weird to do this in person, but good.
So what's been happening in your boring life? We'll close this segment off.
Boring life stuff. I haven't been bitten or attacked by anything, so that's disappointing.
Nice.
I've been doing okay on the health front in terms of poisons and whatnot. Been mowing the lawns pretty regularly, so that's good. The kids are doing their Halloween stuff, and I'm excited with that, but I haven't been too involved with that. They borrowed a few, like they borrowed our smoke machine and a couple of LED lights and that sort of stuff. So
yeah, it looks pretty cool.
yeah, they're pretty happy with that. But no, I've really been pretty slammed with work still, obviously finishing up the Arrow Lake stuff and then moving into the new AMD stuff. And you can see my motherboard wall.
I can see your Z890 wall. I'm sort of looking at it being like, is anyone going to watch that? Because I'm seeing like at least a dozen ASRock boards alone just from where I'm sitting.
It's a depressing... You don't think about it. Really. Just do it.
Yeah,
Just
do it.
don't think is my motto with that one. But yeah, I got to live stream the other night and do some gameplay. So all the regulars from the 8 months prior that I used to stream all tuned in and we had a chat. I'll probably do that again for the 9800X 3D review, because that goes out at like 1 or 2 in the morning our time, something like that. I think 1.
Yep. I will not stay up for that. I'll
so
be in bed.
I'll probably game that night with maybe Balin and maybe my daughter Zoe, so that could be exciting. But yeah, boring life stuff again. I'm hoping once we get through this review cycle to start getting back to the building of the new gym and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And then I'll have a few things to talk about. But yeah, what about you?
Well, I was in Perth over the weekend.
Oh, that's right.
So took a couple of days, got back a couple of days ago, and yeah, I'd never been to Perth or Western Australia before. And yeah, it was lovely over there, to be honest. Really nice sort of chill city for a city of like 2 million people. So we were driving around and stuff, and it was just cool vibes and good weather, and they've got a nice river and beaches out that way, and yeah, it was pretty good.
So while I was slogging away,
while you were slogging around the Intel reviews, I'm like,
worked into an early grave. Tim
I'll
was like,
wash my hands of that, and I'll head out to Perth.
Yeah, you were just worrying about sunscreen application and things like that.
I was a little bit actually. It was it gets warm here, but in Perth it feels like the sun is like hotter or something. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's like different atmosphere. There was like just no clouds in the sky on any of the days. Just like blue sky, hot, like
that'll contribute
30 to 35 degrees Celsius.
So just hot
in October,
weather in general,
which is pretty warm. Like it very rarely gets to that temperature here. But yeah, just very nice city. If you live in Western Australia, you've made a good choice to live in Perth. It seems like a nice place to live, and yeah, interesting things to do. And went to Rottnest Island, saw the quokkas, which are like a little ratty marsupial thing that has no natural predators, so just walks like around like humans and no threat at all. So you can just like walk up to them and stuff, and they just don't care and go about their business. So that was very fun. And yeah, it was with some family that have like little kids that were getting very excited about seeing these like weird little ratty. They're not like a kangaroo, but they're like a cat-sized rat, basically.
Okay, I haven't heard of them.
Have a look at a picture online just to see what I'm talking about. But basically, they just bum around and do nothing and don't get scared by humans, really.
Bit like you last week.
That was fun. But yeah, Perth's it's very far away from the rest of Australia. Like, it feels like most of Australia, if you're not very familiar with Australia, most of the stuff's on the eastern coast. So all our major cities are pretty close together.
How many hour flight is it?
So it's like about 4 hours.
Yeah, okay, so it's going,
So it's pretty far.
I think you can fly 4 hours in pretty much any direction to get to the edge of Australia, can't you?
Yeah.
So it's about as far as you can go by plane, essentially.
Yeah, so we live in Victoria, so near Melbourne. And so to fly from like Melbourne to Sydney, Melbourne to Brisbane, Melbourne to Adelaide,
1 to 2
which
hours.
are all the main cities.
Is it, how many hours is it to Brisbane? Is it only...
Brisbane's like just over 2, I think.
Okay, yeah.
And like Sydney, about an hour. Adelaide's about an hour.
So 1 to 2 was right then.
So yeah, like it's less time to fly to like the Great Barrier Reef then it used to fly to Perth.
Yes. Yep.
So Perth is like
It's the other side
we've
of the
got
country.
all the green stuff, all the cities where most people live, then massive desert. So if you want to drive, you have to drive over what's called the Nullarbor Plain, which is like
I've heard
endless
it's a thrilling
deserts.
drive.
So it's a very straight, very long road in the desert with nothing. And then eventually you get to Perth, which is just there, a nice city of 2 million people and one of the most isolated cities in the world. So yeah, I've always wanted to go over there. So it was nice to spend a couple of days there and see more of Australia, because I've been to a few of the other places. So get out to the west. But yeah, Western Australia is where all of our mining happens. So iron ore mining, I think uranium mining, all that sort of stuff happens. Big industry out that way. You go and see the CBD, and you know how in like Melbourne at the top of the buildings there's like all insurance buildings and stuff. Out there it's like BHP building, the Rio Tinto building. So those are two of Australia's biggest mining companies. There was a Chevron building.
Okay. Yep.
Woodside, they do oil.
Yep.
And it's like, it's pretty clear where the money's coming out that way. So
Mining town.
oil, gas, that sort of thing. So yeah,
Cool.
that's Perth. So I'm back, spent 5 days there. It was nice.
When the benchmark schedule allows for, I might go check it out.
Yeah, go check out Perth. So yeah, that's my boring life really. And that's it. That's it for this podcast episode in person. Only done a couple of those because we did a few at Computex that were in-person episodes.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, well, I look forward to doing this again in March 2025.
Yeah, it will be nice. So yeah,
Actually, it's not March. It'll be like June or...
June for Computex.
Yeah, June for
Yeah.
Computex. Don't know why I said March.
Your times are all messed up.
I've been talking to you now for about 3 hours on camera. So
Yeah, so
my
it'll be
brain
fun.
is fried.
And we've got the Hardware Unbox supporter live stream that we're going to be doing pretty much immediately after this.
So by the time you watch this, we will have done that.
Yep, that's pretty much it. So that's right. Yeah, we'll be after that. So too late if you're listening to this.
Sorry.
Anyway,
Sign up. We'll do it again next month, I promise.
so anyway, yeah, audio version, YouTube version, if you want to support us for whatever reason, watch both of them. The video version is not too exciting. It's just us sitting here having a chat. But yeah, that's it for this episode. Thanks for listening. And we'll be back next week to chat about the 9800 XRE. So get excited about that. And we'll see you in that one.